just oh, there's just people rolling right in the virtual door. So I'll just let them keep on coming in. And for those of you who are here, thank you. And then also, I think that my intrepid co-host, Holly, is not here yet, but hopefully will be here quite soon. We have a few questions to answer tonight that were emailed in beforehand, and so we'll get to those soon. And then also, I suppose I got to make sure without Holly here, can someone who's here chat that you can hear me? And I see that my video may be going in and out, so can you see me? Here, we'll stop my video just for a moment. There we go. And hopefully I'll be able to reconnect. Those of you who are in the meeting though, I believe you could still hear me, and I'll be back video-wise in just a moment. Having apparently an internet issue. In any case, we are here. It is the September 29th, our last a last meeting of September, and then next week we'll start having some themed meetings and talk about some specific themes. I know I'll be talking just this week with some parents about how to create some social opportunities for folks next week, and then also I'll be interested to hear what their ideas might be too. Let's see. I'm gonna just, this is the first time we've had a connectivity issue, so thank you everyone for bearing with me. My video will be back on in a moment. Those of you who are listening and doing dishes, you're just listening to what it sounds like to have a connectivity issue on a Zoom call. Hopefully that's not too bad. In any case, I'll be pulling up some of the data here from other. Oh, I'm just going to stop pushing buttons, folks, and we're going to use a different device. I'm going to pull up some data from our inimitable friends at the Department of Health. We have updated health data per county. And then we also have just a couple things I want to talk about, if I can get my video working again, just a couple things to talk about in terms of school models. I've received a couple questions from folks about when and how will we consider different school models. And I think other schools in the area and other big school districts especially are talking a lot about how they're considering whether to go from distance learning to hybrid or hybrid to in-person. And so I've got a little model that I did plan to draw up in order to share some thinking about that, but that's going to require, quite frankly, a video connection. So in any case, while we're waiting for my video connection to start again, I'm going to do a couple things, and one will be just to answer a couple of the verbal questions. I've also heard from Holly Bell. Holly Bell, just in case any of you were wondering about Holly's canine updates, Holly has a new puppy, and something has gone, I think, a little bit sideways this evening with that puppy. And in particular, I'm also hearing from someone who's not Holly that they stopped Holly and talked to her for just about an hour just now on her walk. And so hilariously, they've let me know also they stopped Holly, and they know Holly has to be on this call. Yeah, so here we are. It's been enough time of me stalling, and so I'll just start answering a couple questions. One question did come in, I think, from a lower elementary parent, and specifically they wanted to know how we go about preparing and engaging in anti-bias and anti-racist education, especially with lower elementary students. And so a few things come to mind right away to respond to that question, and I'll list them out here. One is we work with a community partner to establish a good list of books and resources. And that community partner last year was Amaze. AMAZE, AMAZE, started as a community effort in Minneapolis Public Schools. I think about a dozen years ago. And in any case, we worked with them last year and started to get a good list of resources and books to use. We also found, however, that the AMAZE list was not necessarily comprehensive and also didn't necessarily speak exactly to the questions or issues that our lower elementary students were engaging with. And so in any case, we've added to those lists, and I know especially in the wake of the pandemic and then in the wake of the uprising after the murder of George Floyd in May and June, that our teachers really got together with each other and started to put together lists of books in which stories could be told about a variety of experiences of young people who were experiencing, I think, the tensions associated with witnessing in the news violence and or strife and protests and activism all around race and racial justice. And so those stories do give our young people in the ages 6 to 9 age group some good places to start, I think, in terms of processing and talking to each other. And then in general, talking about fairness, feelings, the experiences of what does it feel like to be in a safe place? What does it feel like when something's not fair? Those are all questions that we use to start when we're talking specifically with lower elementary students about anti-bias and anti-racist work. And then we also talk about vocabulary. And specifically the vocabulary that we're talking about has to do with the vocabulary of, oh, there we go. I think I have a video back in. The vocabulary of, there we go. The vocabulary of how to talk about these big words and what happens when you hear these words, and then how to stand up for each other. So the best practices of building a strong classroom culture are all part of how we set up to work together best to teach anti-bias and anti-racist skills to young people, especially those in lower elementary. And so what I'm going to do, though, is invite our program director, Jean Peters, and I think a couple other key staff people to come in and talk with us at a future family forum about exactly what we do when we go about doing that. I will also just identify that if you as a family see something that is missing in your students' experience, especially around talking about identity or especially around talking about conflict or tension, either in society or in their life, please let us know what's working and what's not working. Also, if you see that we're doing something that perhaps you as a family weren't prepared for, I think it can be perhaps sometimes take a lot of courage in order to speak up about something or ask a question. You think, sometimes I talk to families and they say, well, I thought maybe I should already know that. And so they don't ask questions. But I really want to emphasize that we want to and need to hear from you if something isn't sitting right, or if you want to understand why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. And then in particular, if there's a book or a resource or something shared that didn't sit right with you or you thought wasn't appropriate, we definitely want to hear about that so that we can talk and be on the same page. A lot of the learning that we can do with each other around these issues often does come out of conflict, and specifically that conflict can be a really good thing. It means that we have differing experiences or points of view, and we want to work with each other to make sure that we're working together. So hopefully that was fairly specific and not too general of an answer. So the question that was emailed in was, how do you do anti-biased, anti-racist work with lower elementary students? And so let's see, while I've been talking to you all, I have switched my device for the first time in doing these calls. We're having a device failure. And so in any case, there's now two of me. One of me is on video, and one of me, in fact, is on the phone. And so those of you who are attending, thank you for your patience. Those of you who are listening in, and everyone, just wait one moment while I put the audio and video together here. All right, there we go. Oh, goodness. Thank you so much. Okay, well, if you can't tell, the production team here at Great River School is small, and sometimes if my backup doesn't show up and if my computer falls out, then you find yourself in a situation like this. So I'll continue just with a smaller screen and a smaller venue and in a different spot than I anticipated. And the stark lighting here, let's just, I suppose, appreciate the sun, and then also consider it maybe like an ode to dramatic film and cinematography. In any case, that was one question that was asked. And then a second question that was recently asked was, you know, we'd really like to do some of the in-person meetups that we've been hearing about since August. So, you know, when is the school going to have more in-person meetups? And I will say just succinctly that providing time and space for in-person meetups is something that likely we are going to struggle to do for everyone as a school. And specifically, that's because our teachers and our staff and our time planning is really going into thinking about how to set up the best educational experience for students. And so we have had some meetups that have revolved around either elementary meeting their guides, which many of you have been part of. We've had one biking field trip that I went on last week with some 10th graders. We learned a lot from that. And then we'll be looking at some other meetups of advisories in the lower adolescent, I believe, in the coming weeks. One of the things that our teachers and our educators and our staff are really struggling with, though, is equity and accessibility to meetups. So depending on the time that we choose to do them, depending on the way that we choose to have them in terms of their location, it is really difficult to create an equitable space where it's accessible to all the students who want to be there. And so if you are a family who is really hungry for an in-person meetup and you may feel like you have the capacity, say, to host an in-person meetup, that is something I'm asking for the community to start to offer to each other right now. And so specifically that would be, maybe you live near a green space, or maybe you would be interested in, say, inviting 3 other families or 5 other families to meet, say, on the school campus and walk around the edges of the school campus and pick up litter that blows in off Energy Park Drive, and you want to visit the garden and the campus because you miss it. Please ask if you can do those things, and I'd love to work with you to host those. Also, I've heard lots of great ideas. I will list some of them here, and then very soon also I'll be talking this coming week with returning engagement group, parent and family engagement group ambassadors. And then we're going to be putting a call out for anyone else who wants to get involved. But here are some of the ideas that I've heard that you families could host. One of the ideas I've heard is specifically around putting together, say, an outdoor board game event where there are board games that you can play spaced out enough from each other that you get to do something, you're outdoors before the snow flies, and things feel great. And so that is something you could all do, is do that. And if the school's not facilitating it, that doesn't mean that you can't build community by inviting folks into shared ownership of meeting safely, being physically distanced, wearing masks and being outside, and then being with each other and saying, you're part of this learning community, I'm part of this learning community. Isn't it great that we organized this thing and we're building this community? That's something I think is rare out in the world to do, is to invite people who you may not be friends with yet, but may live close to you or may be in your classroom. And so what I will do, though, in this next week is make sure that we reiterate and resend out a family directory that has lists of students and phone numbers and emails of other families. And then also I'll be working with the parent engagement group to talk about sending out the annual map of addresses where people are. So unless you've opted out of sharing your address and directory information, we have worked with our parents, and our parents have published maps in the past, and caregivers have published maps in the past of the addresses where they are, so you can find people that are in your neighborhoods. And so the other ideas that I've heard have to do with hosting maybe like hikes or walks or meetups at parks, possibly working with Great River School and coming and using a big parking lot and projecting up a movie and having a drive-in movie. I've also then heard folks with ideas such as getting together groups of students to say paddleboard near each other at a place where you can rent those things, or gathering groups of students to play soccer. And so that is happening with some organized ways through the school. Like we do have a soccer team that is functioning as a really good club right now, especially for the lower adolescent and upper elementary students. However, you don't have to wait for us. You families don't have to wait for us who are compensated by the school and employed to organize community building events. And if you want some ideas on how to gather safely or how to set up safe spaces, I do have some protocols that we'll be sharing soon. I'm not sure if we'll get them published for this Thursday's family newsletter, but we will share them soon. And so that was the response to a question that was, when's the school going to organize more social meetups for us? And so if you didn't catch it, my short answer was, we're going to organize more academic meetups, and I really need you as families to join in and organize some social meetups if you like that. And so then the last thing that I'd like to talk about tonight, though I'm really happy to have any Q&A put forward by anybody who's here. I don't have Holly, my intrepid co-host, here to read the Q&A with me. And for any of you who joined in while I was having technical difficulties, thanks for bearing with me. I wanted to talk a little bit about the data that's coming out in terms of case numbers per 10,000. And specifically, what does that mean? And so the state of Minnesota put forward, and I'm going to break out for the first time in, I think this will work. It's a little, this is a whiteboard. The sunshine is so bright right now that I feel like I should have prepared some shadow puppetry, but I haven't, and so I will perhaps for a future time though. In any case, thank you for bearing with me. I wanted to talk a little bit about cases per 10,000 and what does that mean. And so when the state of Minnesota has put forth the data, what they have been saying is that they have these ranges, and I do believe, we'll see if this is a mirror function. I'm still going to write on the whiteboard, and we'll just see how this functions. Oh, hi, Holly, you're here. I'll promote you. Holly, it's been quite a time. Both, there we go. And those of you who, I hope those of you who are here can take the mishaps of today's adventures as humor and not grating frustration. Holly, I can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, am I unmuted?
Oh, great. Oh, wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, good, good.
I can see your shadow puppets.
Oh, good. I'm glad you can. It's been a series of unfortunate events for me today, but only in the last 15 minutes or so. And in fact, there was a whole digital board meeting that I did just fine with but my computer has frozen in space and it's got a spinning wheel of doom.
Oh,
And that happened while I was, I know, that's while I was first hosting this meeting. And
dear.
so all the screen share that I had pulled up isn't ready to share. But I'm about to talk about cases per 10,000 because
Excellent.
I think that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Just I think to say a pedestrian trying to understand. But Holly, you can give me some feedback. Can you see anything I'm writing here? Does it say
This is
anything
0
that you
to
can
10.
read?
0 to 10.
Oh, good. It's not backwards for you.
No.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, good. Great. So 0 to 10, then 10 to 20, and then 20 to 30, and then I believe 30 to 50, and 50 plus. And so the Department of Education has given us these ranges of numbers. And what they say is that in each of these ranges, basically, based on some data, frankly, that was coming out a lot this summer, but since this summer, I have heard even conflicting epidemiological data, but the data this summer that they were basing these off said basically that lower elementary and young students, so students at the time this summer that I've seen this data come out and really be used by the CDC for recommendation, they were saying students under the age of 10. So basically what they're saying is that lower elementary students have less incidence of serious health concerns when they get this virus. And it was unclear in the summer whether or not lower elementary students of that age globally were real vectors for this disease to be communicable. And so in any case, the lower elementary, and for us now upper elementary, and then we have a whole adolescent program, the state of Minnesota basically said you should divide these out into some different kinds of categories, where your younger students, say in an elementary program, and then your older students in an adolescent program, they have different guidance based on the numbers. And so if numbers, say, are between, I believe, 20 and 30 cases per 10,000, what they say is for the adolescent program, and this is where it gets a little funny, because age 10 and under for us is actually about half of an upper elementary room, but by the end of the year, it's a third of the upper elementary room. And so we gotta, well, hello, who's that with you, Holly?
This is Hoopy.
Oh, Whoopy?
Hoopy, Hoopy.
Oh, Hoopy. Hi, Hoopy. Hoopy, I think the high contrast, perhaps. Hoopy's very interested in the shadow puppetry. In any case, the Department of Education has said for older students, say between 20 and 30, you should all then be, I believe, in distance learning. But then for younger students, if your cases are between 20 and 30, then you can be in hybrid learning. And then as you go up in case counts, distance learning takes up more space. If you go down in case counts, then between 10 and 20, they say hybrid for the older kids, in person, and between 0 and 10, they've recommended in person. Now, let's just be honest, folks. This is an imaginary scenario. And now I've brought my secret eraser, also known as the flannel shirt sleeve. I want to just bring back some skills from me as an art teacher, which is if I draw a picture of it, it tends to hold your attention a little bit more. So specifically, I want to start talking about this distance learning idea, often known as DL, and the way that you would somehow move between distance learning, hybrid, and in-person, which I will call IP, right? And so these three models suggested by the state, just to review, theoretically, the more distance learning you are, the more distant you are from people, and therefore the less communicable this disease is in our community. And if the disease is not highly present in our community, we're supposed to be able to make a local decision to be more in person, but always be able to go back to distance learning if we need to at any moment. Now, if any of you are teachers, have worked with teachers, know teachers, you know that planning for what you're doing tomorrow is, I guess I would say, just to throw a number on it, 95% of a teacher's job. And when you show up, especially in a Montessori room, you've prepared the environment for students to interact with it. And one of the real struggles right now for us is when we prepare, we can't easily go between these models and do the same thing that we would have done. We would all love to be in person. In fact, I don't even want to get into the sort of economic game of measuring what's it worth to be in person, because I think what we're dealing with right now is health and safety. And so I don't think that there is a balance that you can find between, well, when's it going to get so bad from staying home for so long that we should just go back in person kind of regardless of the virus. I guess I would say it's never going to get that bad from being at home. The virus is a thing that's affecting us all right now. It's a historic event. And I think when we look back on this time and when we tell the stories of what happened here, there aren't going to be good readers and bad readers as adults in society because of what happened this year, last year, and the following year because of the virus. There will, however, be lots of times to think, should we have been more cautious, or could we have cared for those who are most vulnerable among us any better? And so that's where I guess I would propose that when we talk about going between these models, that there is both a virus incidence aspect to this. There's also, as the chart from the Department of Education shows, it shows the distance learning circle, the hybrid circle, and then the in-person circle like this, right? Ooh. And then specifically it says, as viral activity increases, it'll be more distance. And then down here, it's this thing that I think folks aren't really necessarily integrating into our understanding so well together. It's like, I think I have an understanding of it, but I don't know if any of you watching or listening have the same understanding. And so as I look at this graph down here, this is our community's ability to engage in successful mitigation strategy, right? The successful mitigation strategy includes things I do and you do, but it also includes things society can do. So for instance, when, say, Holly and I are together at the building, and then I go home and learn that one of my kids tested positive for COVID, which is, that hasn't happened, it's fictional. I have to call Holly up and say, Holly, you and I spent all day in the same room, and my family member just tested positive, meaning I've probably been exposed. I got to let you know that. We're all going to go get tests now. Holly and I have to know how long it's going to take to get that result back and how accurate that's going to be. And then, frankly, everyone else who works in that room with Holly and I have to come to terms with, are they comfortable understanding the difference between mitigation and prevention? And I don't think that that's something that our society has come to terms with, but prevention is a guarantee that the thing that you're trying to avoid will not happen. And prevention is not mitigation. And the best thing we got right now to put at this virus and be together is mitigation. And so in order to come together more, we have to know that we have successful mitigation. And I'll report from the front lines of real stories this past week. And perhaps it's better that I'm drawing it out rather than sharing the 4 screens that I had prepared. We do not yet as a society have a mitigation strategy that allows us to be doing in-person learning without a high degree of chaos and unpredictability. Specifically, cases per 10,000. What does that mean? So if the big 10,000 looks like this, and we're talking about 3 cases per 10,000, that would be very low, right? We're in the 0 to 10 count. And those 3 cases per 10,000 would, be, if there's 10,000 dots in here, those 3 little cases, I guess I'll draw them as squares. Those 3 little cases here would be here. And if they happen 3 per 10,000, you can count them up, you can look for them, you can find them, and then you can probably figure out how to contain them, right? What we're talking about countywide is actually, we're still around 20. And so when you start to imagine 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, geez, here we go. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. You start to get the idea that if all of these are bouncing around in your case, in your circle of 10,000, it becomes harder to track one down, contain it, and then figure out how to make sure that everyone can keep going about their business, but your 20 or so cases per 10,000, what you're doing now at this point is you're treating or containing the people when they report it, but you don't know who else they came into contact with. And so we have about 1,000 people in our community. We've got about 800 students, about 120 staff. I'm just going to round it out so it's easy to count. And so when you hear that there's about 20 cases per 10,000, well, I'll just go to my decimal points. And what I know about that is that if you, say, divide your 10,000 by 10, and you've got 1,000, that's about the same size as our school. And your 20 cases per 10,000 actually turn into how many cases at Great River School? Well, about 2. And that doesn't seem like a huge deal unless you start to do the consequential figuring on what happens if we are going to school together, and there's about 1,000 of us in this community, and on average, statistically, I can say that our community is affected accurately by the statistics you read in the newspaper. So when you read, say, that 7% of students experience a thing, it's probably true that at Great River School, you got about 70 kids who are, probably about 42 kids who are experiencing that thing, right? If you read that 50% of all families experience a thing, it's probably true that about 50% of our families experience it. And so when you have 21 cases per 10,000, woo, so many zeros. Say in, I think it was one of the 7 counties this past week had that. At Great River School, you're talking about 2 per 1,000, and that's okay. We could probably hear from this person who might say be in 9th grade and this person who might say be in 2nd grade. In fact, this is last week's picture of who we heard from that was either exposed to or may have tested positive for COVID-19. And so because we're in distance learning now, these 2 people don't stop anyone's learning. If we were not in distance learning, we would have to then take the whole corner of the pie that 9th grader touched and have them all stay home for 2 weeks immediately. And then we would have to say, well, are there other adjacent areas of that pie where that person actually may have also been in contact? And what we also know, both from anecdotes and from data from other schools, is that what's likely is if we have this part of the pie stay home, there's a whole nother third of the pie, which I will draw with lines. These are cautious people. These people say, oh, there was a case at school. Well, I think we're just going to stay home for a couple of days and make sure there weren't other cases. And so what you end up looking at is 2 per 1,000 means that at any moment, a quarter to half of your students could just go home for 2 weeks. And so we got to jump from whatever we were doing back in distance learning. And then we didn't even talk about how we probably have another case at school and it's probably in a different area. And so the same effect starts to happen. And so if you think about the protocol from the CDC and Department of Health in Minnesota is that when you have a person who is tested positive, anyone who's in close contact with them should be on a 14-day quarantine, and you don't test out of that quarantine. So Holly and I could have seen that person at our imaginary daily school and said to ourselves, oh, geez, okay, then we'll go get tested. Well, actually, you got to wait 5 to 7 days for that test to be accurate. So half of our 14 days are spent waiting, and then we could still go get a test. And then because the tests are not 100% accurate and we're really still trying to mitigate and slow the spread of this disease, the Department of Health still tells Holly and I when we get our test, if you've been exposed in close contact, still stay quarantined for another week after this test and make sure you don't get new symptoms. And so 14 days in a school year of 168 days starts to add up real fast if you're looking at consequential and impacted people from 2 cases per 1,000, right? So what I've been saying is we have to be at or below 10 in all of the counties for a sustained amount of time before we're even going to imagine going back in person. And that's because what we've done is we've taken all of the impacts from these cases, and through our distance learning model, what we've actually said is, that's okay, you all stay home. And in fact, because you're already home, your cases can be contained and handled right in your family, and nobody else loses out on learning because of that. And then I just want to remind folks that we do have a learning community, and I've been saying for several years that we are not a customer service organization, and it sometimes gets laughs and sometimes gets funny looks. But what do I mean by that? What I mean is we're not vending something at a marketplace, and our learning community is only as strong as, frankly, your buy-in to that concept that we have to be in a community. And so we're right now in one of the hard parts of being in a community where in this pie chart that represents our about 1,000 people in our community. And right now, when I name 1,000 people, it's about 930 people that are on campus on any given day in a normal school day. I'm not counting any of the parents or any of the caregivers or any of the extended family members who live in these households. My rough estimate on the number of people impacted by the learning community every day, if you include caregivers and parents and people who live in the same house as the students who are here. And I'm also including dual household families. So, you know, your kid, I as a kid might go to one household on Tuesdays through Fridays and a different household on Fridays through Mondays or something. In any case, counting all of those folks, I know that our community impacts, and I'll put it over here, somewhere near about 2,800 people. And so that's a large burden of responsibility as an organization to make sure that we're not responsible for the vector of this disease going to any of those 2,800 people, right? So a third, roughly, of our families said that they're going to stay home really out of caution all year. And the state made very clear, and we are in fact happy to keep our learning community together. A third of our families are doing distance learning no matter what we declare all year. And many states are struggling with this, and many counties in the state of Minnesota are struggling with this. It's that even if we were in in-person learning right now, forget these two cases, these people, again, about a third of our pie, and that's kind of a small third, I guess. Don't let me cut pie when we share pie, Holly.
Well, it depends on which one you get.
It's true. That's true. Yeah, let's split this in half. I'll take this piece. You take that one. A third of our families are committed to distance learning for the year. I will also then share that about half of our families, and I will mark those families with dots over here, said that they really like to come back in person, but very specifically, they're cautious and not super trusting about whether or not it's safe to come back in person. And so this is the half of families that I'm hearing at other schools who are either in hybrid or in person. When there is a case reported, these families want to do distance learning for a couple weeks. And so they want to go back and forth, right? And then remember, we're in a learning community. So again, and this half is just a little small. We do have a good portion of families who need a place for their students to be every day. And so if you haven't been sort of paying attention outside of your sphere of your family, you may have missed that currently at Great River School, we are holding this learning community intact by welcoming in-person learners on campus at our SRC, and by really focusing our licensed teacher time on providing the highest quality distance learning we can provide, and then serving the people here who are still tentative through distance learning, serving the people in person who we can. And frankly, again, I've used this metaphor a few times, but it may be less like a metaphor and more like an actual description. This is a storm. I think a storm can be defined as an interruption to your normally planned event. It can be described as a time of great change and tumult. It can also be described as a huge transfer of time and energy between, you know, one way and state of the environment and another. And so when we're talking about the cases per 10,000 and given those reports, I guess I wanted to just invite everyone to do their decimal trick and realize that when the state of Minnesota gives these 0 to 10, am I writing this too small, Holly, or can you see them?
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay, great. 20 to 30, I think 30 to, can't remember if it's 30 to 40 or if it just jumps to 50, but 40 to 50 and 50 plus. What you can imagine is that you do the decimal trick here, and that 0 to 10 means 0 to 1 cases in the Great River School community. 10 to 20 means 1 to 2 cases in the school community. So on and so on, using the decimal trick of just removing the 0, right? In fact, maybe that is a more accurate and dramatic way of doing it, right? So in the Great River School community, these case counts per 10,000, it's pretty easy to do the math and say, well, what would that mean for our community? And what it means is the state has told us, if you think you're going to have more than 5 cases in your community, distance learning. And what I know about the vectors of this disease, the communicability of it, and then what we have to do, if we have 1 case, it doesn't take long to get to 5 cases. And so I just want to report back that we have successfully used our safety protocols, even just this past week, for students who are on site at the Student Resource Center. Remember, it's about maybe 20% of our students total are on the Resource Center throughout the week. Our students on site, we have one student who is definitely exposed to a relative who tested positive, and we were able to close down part of the Resource Center, respond and have that student get a test. That student actually tested negative. They are still quarantining, but that negative test means that we are fairly confident. Like medical conditions, doctors, epidemiologists have all been taken into account, and all of those perspectives have informed us that if that student tested negative, it's likely that they weren't communicable when they were on campus. And so we were able, after just one day of being away, to bring everybody back on campus. Now, what I thought to myself is, that affected the life of about 14 students. But if we were in-person learning and we had to do that, that could have easily affected the life of about 125 students, plus about 35 staff. And then we would have basically been on hold for a day, and we just aren't ready yet as a society or a school to jump into distance learning. But when you see these case counts, think about them as this many counts in the Great River School community. And what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to be in a place in which our mitigation is so successful that we can in fact be in distance learning. And we know the difference between mitigation and prevention. We can be in-person learning. And we know the difference though between mitigation and prevention. And what I would want is, as we draw the graph the state of Minnesota gave us, is that as we say go from distance learning to another model, I can tell you that when you hear the big districts say they're going to decide whether or not to go in person, I made that arrow the wrong way. What they're really deciding is whether or not they have enough staff to move from distance learning to another model. And so we are working closely with our staff. I just want to say it is not heroism, but is in fact a deep sense of, I think, responsibility and an understanding of what keeps our current in-person SRC, the School Resource Center, right? The School Resource Center right now is providing some in-person support. And so in many ways, we are practicing how to best do this in-person model, but we're only able to do it safely and securely on campus because we have about 20% of the students there. And so we can learn from that and know how to do it best. It's informing how we can get to there, but especially with case counts up in the 20s or in the high teens, I know what that means for our small community school is that we're likely, because we're drawing students from so many different areas also, to really have to take care to know how we can respond. And the way that students and staff and families right now get COVID tests back is too unpredictable to be able to do an in-person model for everyone well. But everyone can learn through distance learning, and we're learning how to do it. Teachers are still learning how to do it. Students are still learning how to do it. It's, it's a low bar to say it's better than it was in April. But it's also, I think, something to take into account that we're living through a global pandemic, and the school is providing right now, I think, a model in which what it looks like is sometimes meeting the needs of a community means that everybody has to compromise a little bit on what's ideal for them. And so that sense of shared ownership is that what we're owning together right now is the safety for every community member. And what we're sacrificing a bit right now is that in-personness that I saw, many news reports over this past summer about folks all over the country who didn't want to sacrifice their in-personness and cause a bit of discomfort in order to protect the most vulnerable among us. And so, there's many things to be said about it. I'm not interested in moralizing about it, but I do think that the lesson that our children and frankly the adults in our community, including me, can learn from this experience is that sometimes caring for those who are most vulnerable among you means it takes you a long time to make a decision. And it also means that you don't get to do what you want to do in the moment. And it probably means if you feel really sure about a decision, it's even good at that point to pause and ask 3 other people what they think, just to really make sure you know what you're doing. And so, so there were a few questions because I think the city of St. Paul and St. Paul Public Schools, and then I also think that Minneapolis Public Schools, there's been some news about whether or not they're going to do a hybrid model for their 1st and 2nd graders or something like that. So I'm gonna over the next month work with both volunteer staff and students and parents and family members who over the summer came together to talk about communication, safety and health, pedagogy, and student support. And we're going to be reconvening those design groups and those working groups over the month of October to do our quarterly review of what's working, what could work better, what's not working, what can we change, and then specifically also then to be looking at the model that we're using. So I'm confident right now, though. I know the first date to look at our models and whether or not we're going to change is put on the calendars mid-October. I'm confident that we'll still be in distance learning through mid-October, and I'm also confident we'll be in distance learning into November at least, while we look at both how these rising case counts in the state of Minnesota come up, and then it's already started in terms of cold and flu season. So, you know, a runny nose, a cough, a sneeze, a feeling of tiredness are all now a high degree of sort of concern, whereas before we used to just call that October. And now we call that, what do we have to do? Do we have to quarantine? Do we have to what do we have to do? And so as we live through that now, I just think the way that we can be secure and predictable is to stay where we are in terms of distance learning, but also to know families, if you need an in-person setting and need social interaction for your kid, please let us know if you're interested in the School Resource Center, because that's something we can do too. Okay, so there's 30 minutes, improvise a bit because of the technological downsides, but this is technology, writing, the written word, that's technology. My children are inspiring me with a handwriting. We're doing daily handwriting, and so I'm just noticing I'd like to practice my cursive a little bit more. So Holly, any questions that you have? I don't see any in the Q&A.
I don't see
I'm not sure who's here.
But
yeah.
In my admin meeting today, I mean, it wasn't my admin meeting, it was everyone in admin having a meeting.
Yeah. Director of First Impressions, yeah.
Right. Stacy mentioned that there's going to be a flu shot clinic at Great River and that anyone can come.
That's in fact true, and I believe it is Friday. Is that true, Holly?
I believe
Friday?
that is this week.
All right, great. So we've organized a flu shot clinic. I believe there are a minimum number of participants needed in order to make that clinic happen, but I think there's up to 100, what do you call that? Dispensations? Doses? Shots?
Yeah.
Shots.
That's
Just use the noun. Just call it a shot. So 100 shots with the flu vaccine for this year are there and ready. And so, Holly, did Stacy say how you might say you want in on that?
She just said come. So I think
okay,
send an email to office@greatriverschool.org and say, yes, I would love to bring my insurance card and get a free shot.
Yes, indeed.
And I think they usually have a couple of the nasal ones too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So if you're interested in that, you're getting an insider sort of invitation here from Holly Bell, Director of First Impressions. I know that the intention is that any staff who want those flu shots, that we are providing a very easy way for them to get them. And then secondly, I think that as we move into the winter, I expect that cold and flu season will keep us all, frankly, on the edge of our seat with, is this the cold or is this pandemic? And so as we experience that, I think that meetups and the way we see each other socially could continue in the winter. But Holly, just before I think you joined, I was saying to families that we are really filling our plates and have our plates full right now at school with planning academic meetups and meeting the needs of students and really making sure students are engaged. And that families, if you've got ideas for social meetups, we need each other right now. And so offer things to each other and please organize that shared social ownership of our community. So again, this isn't a resort. I'm not the club director. But in fact,
we do want to be inclusive.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and what I did report also, is that we're struggling with, as educators, on the educator side of the fence in our neighborhood here, we're struggling with how to be inclusive and doing something we know not everyone can attend, either because of transportation, the timing of the day, a parent that works and can't provide the transportation, a sibling say in the junior high or senior high, who has to care for other siblings and so can't go to their advisory meeting in the middle of the day. That kind of concern for inclusivity has frankly hamstrung our ability to just do something to meet some people's needs. However, as a society and as a diverse group of families, please go meet some of your needs with some other family, and know that one of the things that's holding us up is we are trying our best to really be thoughtful on how we execute on things. And so, in any case, I see a picture question though about school pictures.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And I do believe we are just working out some logistics about school pictures and how to do them in a, we've had several proposals, but how to do them in a, dare I say, a la graduation 2020, in a drive-through fashion, which again, I've been talking with some schools are doing school pictures in which actually a photographer goes to each home of a student who can't leave home and they have a school picture. We have not decided yet how we can best do that, but you can expect, I believe, before November, we would like to be executing on how to get some school pictures taken. So yes, the short answer is yes. The long answer is we're not exactly sure how we're going to get it done because there seems to be a little wrinkle in any of the approaches. So the sort of lowest, hilariously, the lowest tech, easiest to comply with suggestion has been the selfie school picture montage. And there's just something that isn't school picture-y about that, you know, sort of this thing. And so, and so I hope to avoid that, but you know, if worst comes to worst, and that's what we got to do.
What about Zoom pictures?
That's how we'll fill the yearbook. Oh, that would be another moment of reality, wouldn't it? Could it be a Zoom picture? Yeah, I think we could have a theme. The theme, in fact, could be like when you thought the camera was off. You know, like with like the bowl of cereal halfway in your mouth.
Yeah.
yeah. Or you thought you were muted, so it's like a scratch and sniff version, but the picture itself makes all the noises you thought were muted. That would be. Yeah. This
could be a great yearbook.
Harry Potter. I know, right? You can take some audio-visual coordination. Yes, there should be some school pictures, but details forthcoming. And then, you know, I will speak up about one thing, Holly. I think folks have been requesting perhaps, I've seen more structure to the schoolwork. I've seen a lot of comments to that. And then just those of you who have made that comment, there have been an equal number of comments of my kid's day or my day as a student is so structured now. I have to check in so many times on these Zoom calls. It's wearing me out. And so just know again, I think I erased that circle, but a diverse set of needs, how to meet them all. And so if you just think of one thing after this call, hopefully it would be, you would think of a pie chart where in the pie chart, basically everybody's needs are different, right? We have a distance learner need. We have sort of let's see if I can just draw some of a nervous face. We have some trepidatious people, and then we have some people who got to be in the school building. So I'll draw the ubiquitous school building picture. There we go. Good. And so when we're trying to meet all three of these needs, this goes also for people who really want a lot more structure to their day, and then people who feel like the day is so structured. And so getting your needs met, though, will require collaboration. And so please do speak up. Let your guide know in a particular class or in your classroom if you need more structure. And then also, frankly, I think I've never thought I'd work at a school and say this, especially a Montessori school. But Montessori students and students who are not oriented very strongly to Montessori alike often get a special kind of dopamine rush from finishing a worksheet. Mm-hmm. And so I know some of our classrooms have been providing worksheets and adding some structure to your day, some supplemental or what would you call it, enrichment activities, whether it be a handwriting worksheet or whether it be you make your own flashcards for something, or whether it be you are doing something that is contained and manageable and finishable, like you're just practicing spelling things, is also something you can add in as a family and, you know, make it age appropriate. So for an older student, that might be the kind of practical life work that I talked a lot about back in the summer and haven't talked so much about it now. But if you need more structure to your day, we are working to provide it, and please let us know if you need it. And then I'd also say, in the community effort spirit, look at maybe the things that your student could take on. And especially though for first years who maybe not be independently literate yet, there are a fair number of those first graders who join our school every year. I know this is a particularly challenging venue to not be able to engage independently in what's on the screen, and particularly hair pulling for parents to be in that position too. So we are working on ways that we can do that, but please just keep in contact with us about how we can do better by you. And really that's because I'm saying the do better thing, not because, again, you're a customer, but because, you know, like I want to do better by Holly, just in our working relationship. But just, you know, I just invite you to give some feedback, folks. Give some feedback, but maybe don't give feedback without thinking to yourself too, and what's one or two things I could do to improve this too. And of course, if you're just feeling like you're ready to pull your hair out and you know, pour dinner out the window and just call it a night, like it's just hopeless, then perhaps the one or two things you could do are take a deep breath and not break the computer. Yeah. And if that's all you can do, great. That's fine. That's great. Any other questions, Holly? Do you see anything else?
I don't see any other questions. I have one that's sort of off topic, just to finish it up.
Well, you put me on the spot often. I hope people don't think that this is scripted, Holly, because I never know what you're going to say.
Are you okay
go ahead.
with this?
Yeah, I am. Last one.
You know how the great blue heron is our mascot?
Oh, yeah.
Why do we have a great blue heron as a mascot?
Well, that's a good question. There's a long story to that. There's a short story to that, and then there's probably there's probably a lot of different ways that the story could be told. One, yes. Our official mascot for our sporting teams in varsity athletics at Great River School is actually the Stars.
That's not
yeah. Well, and I was just going to say the Stars because when we started our school, we were actually one of 5 different charter schools that all started at the same time.
Yes, and I was
and we were all together.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it was Avalon and Great River School and TCA and a couple others.
Yes, that's how
I didn't do my homework. Yeah, I don't want to misname them, but I believe Augsburg Academy was one, and I can't remember the 5th one. In any case, that's why we're the Stars. And now we're the Tiger Stars because TCA has the Tigers, and long story short, is the Star Tigers. Great. So, but the heron is a bird that was actually just, I believe, put with the logo. And when it was put with the logo of Great River School, I think the idea was to emphasize the ecological and environmental awareness of where do things live and how do they live there. And herons reside near rivers sometimes. And I will also say that it's commonly, I think, assumed by many folks that our school is named after the Mississippi River, as the large river that starts in Minnesota. And it's actually not. There's a Montessori story about a river that flows through humanity and carries the gifts of humanity to each other, and how there are different people along the river and different communities and villages and ways of being, and that the way that the river of humanity flows between all of those people and villages and cultures and ways of being, there it is, carries with it the wisdom and learning of humanity. And so the Great River School was named that as an adolescent path of Montessori in the Twin Cities for students who are leaving an elementary school and wanted an adolescent Montessori experience. But that river story was told many times in the first few years of Great River School and has not been told much publicly since. So maybe I'll look at one of these family nights. Yeah, one of these family nights, perhaps inviting someone who knows that story better to come and tell it.
Excellent.
Yeah,
answer.
thanks for putting me on the spot. Thanks for putting me on the spot, Holly.
Once again.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, folks. Well, I believe the time has come.
It has.
So thank you for joining us. If you've been here, if you're listening at home, thank you for listening. I still hear from folks who email in questions. And so I gave a short answer to one of those emailed in questions about anti-biased, anti-racist curriculum for lower elementary students. And we'll give a more full answer. I'm going to bring a couple guest speakers on in the next couple weeks, and we'll talk more about that. Okay. Thank you for joining, Holly. Oh, Holly, you'll have to show us your puppy in the next call.
The one that I'm fostering or my real one?
Well, whichever one held you up today.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you. Bye.